there you are, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, we're away. Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'm Dan Parnell from the University of Liverpool. I'm joined by Jan Andrzej Lee Ludvigsen from Liverpool John Moores University. This is the talk that me and Jan were going to do this on our own, but so we're glad a few people have joined us. It was a talk that never happened, so we planned it in, I believe it was early March. Is that right, Jan? We planned it.
I think it was St. Patrick's Day, 17th, wasn't it? 17th of March.
Yeah, so we'd well planned it. I'm sure it was going to be a talk and then go out for something to eat.
Definitely.
Jan was going to come and talk to me football industry's MBA students around security and around football and give a bit of a researcher PhD perspective. So yeah, this is the talk that never happened. So I'm made up to get you on now, Jan.
Thank you as well.
My FINBA students had 2 days of crisis management simulations, so I'm sure they won't be up or awake at this point to join us. But let me introduce you really quickly, Jan, and then we'll get going. So Jan completed his BA in sociology at Liverpool John Moores University. Then he joined University of Liverpool. So he came over to the dark side or the bright side. And he got a Master's in Art and International Relations and Security. So that was in December 2017. Then he was awarded a 3-year scholarship for John Moores to do his PhD, and he's been there. And Jan, you've been involved in a number of different research projects, and also you've been, I met you via our shared friend Peter Millward, but you've also been ridiculously prolific. So you've managed to get 11 publications out. And you've also got a chapter with Peter that you co-authored, and also a number of conference appearances. So it's great to have you join me for this and us for this conversation. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I think, as you say, we have a kind of shared network, and there's been a few interesting research projects as well. And I guess what we're going to talk about and kind of converse about today is mostly my PhD project and security at sports events, some of the impact of COVID-19 as well, and just generally talk about how we have been impacted by what's going on at the moment in terms of our projects and in terms of my research as well. So I think we're going to have a good chat today, definitely. And thanks for the introduction as well. It was very nice.
No worries. Yeah, brilliant. Do you want to just kick us off by just telling us a little bit about what your PhD research is, and then we'll take it from there then?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm looking at, as you said, security at sports events. The case I'm looking at is Euro 2020, which is a quite interesting one, not just because it's been recently postponed for 12 months, but also because it was meant or will be still some uncertainty, of course, around it, whether it will take place in 12 countries. But anyway, that was the kind of unique format of it that drew my attention to the Euro 2020 as a case. So what I'm interested in really is the concept of security, what security means in the context of sports, how security is constructed or kind of reconstructed from event to event as well. And also I'm interested in the perceptions of security, so the constructions, meanings and perceptions of security in the context of the Euro 2020. So we can start with the meanings, of course. Meanings, what does security mean? It has no real one definition, so it means different things to different people, to organizers, to sponsors. So I'm trying to kind of find out what the different organizations or actors within the mega event theater, what they think about security, what security means to them. I'm also looking how they, as I said, reconstruct or kind of recirculate security policies from previous events onto the upcoming events. So this, I guess, relates a bit to the kind of globalization of security policies and security knowledge, how they pass on this knowledge through networking events and conferences and practices onto in my case, Euro 2020. And then the last one, the kind of interesting one, which is the perceptions. I was originally, my PhD was largely interested in looking at the perceptions of security amongst fans. So my plan was to go to the London fan zones this summer. I had everything booked, and hotels and trains and everything. And then, of course, this part of my thesis was kind of abandoned because of recent events, of course. Hopefully I can do that as a kind of postdoc project or whatever when time comes. But so that's, in a nutshell, that's kind of what I am looking at in terms of my PhD research. So I'm looking at the concept of security from a range of different angles in the context of Euro 2020. And also, of course, sorry.
I was going to say, can I ask, Jan, because, yeah. I mean, I'm going to ask you why security is so important now, but obviously, looking back on your career, you chose to do a master's in international relations and security. What was the rationale for engaging in that master's, and was a PhD always part of the plan?
So the reason why I chose to do my master's at the time in international relations and security was because I was very interested by the study of security, the concept of security, and the kind of how security in a kind of post 9/11 society has shaped the way we live. But as you said a bit before as well, my undergrad was in sociology, so I kind of took with me some kind of sociological tools into that master's in international relations and security. And I realized when I was starting to apply for PhDs that is there any way I can kind of merge my interest, between sociology of sports, which I was very interested in as an undergrad, and also my more recent interest in security. And it turned out the best way to combine the two was to look at security at sports events. So I kind of wrote up a PhD project plan or a proposal, and I was quite lucky to get a scholarship almost as soon as I graduated. So so in that regard, that's what really drew my interest to the concept of security at sports. And we also see that, I should have probably said in the beginning, but we see how kind of security developments, so I mentioned 9/11, for instance, how these security developments actually impact. So the security developments broad outside of sport actually impact the ways in which security is organized in sports and in sports events as well. So I'm trying to look at the kind of link between those two.
And now, how important is security now? So naturally, there's natural tensions that people in the general public will be aware of. But how has security changed since, you say, this post 9/11 era? How security changed, and how important is it? And is it a really real issue?
In terms of the general society, or in terms of sports?
Within sports.
Yeah. So I mean, if you look at some of the recent cases in recent Olympic Games, recent World Cups, some of these security operations at these events are actually compared to war operations. So some of the security operations that are taking place at security events are actually some of the largest security operations in the world, which is quite paradoxical because we think about sport as a kind of game, or as a kind of, we don't actually see sport as a site where one of the largest security operations in the world is going to take place, but they actually do. And another reason for this, of course, is because there are various threats to sports events, and it's of course the terrorist threat, it's the threat of disorder and support violence, as we have seen very recently. It's the threat of epidemics, the threat of pandemics. It's the threat of crime. It's the threat of, there's so many different factors that play a part in the securitization of an event. So that's the reason why these security budgets at sports event post 9/11 have really just increased and increased. And we're talking about billions of dollars that go into creating security. And it's also, I think you touched upon this as well, Dan. How much is for actually providing security, and how much of this is just for, in quotation marks, show, because the security at sports events become a part of the actual spectacle of an event. So we know that Olympic Games and World Cups are very spectacular occasions, and the security operation kind of embeds itself in that spectacle. So that's why we can kind of say we're talking about, and this is the concept, spectacular security, which is not just to actually provide security, but it's also to actually kind of convey images of security being there and that something is actually being done, you know, in terms of easing anxieties.
Yeah, and I mean, I see a few me football industry students have joined us now. So who will your research speak to? Yeah. So.
So in terms of like academic disciplines and in terms of audiences,
Yeah.
I like to think about myself as someone who kind of flows in between different disciplines to some degree. I would say it speaks to quite a few subject areas. You know, it's not just sociology of sports. It's not just the kind of policing studies. It's actually we're talking about management, event management, sport management. We're talking about criminology to a degree. So you know, I draw upon my kind of, as you mentioned before, my background in security studies in terms of how I try to explain the concept of security. But of course, a lot of my findings and a lot of the stuff I'm going into are highly relevant for students who are looking to become or to kind of organize events, or who are into events management, sports management, so they can kind of have this kind of practical edge to it as well. You know, I think that's really one of the things with this project, that it kind of speaks to a range of different subject areas, and also it has this practical side to it as well.
So obviously you were preparing for obviously the Euros 2020. First off, you know, as a PhD student, you know, forget about obviously the personal side of or the professional side, sorry, of a global pandemic. Personally, how has that impacted you and your research, and how you're feeling at the minute in terms of, you know, you had a lot of plans in place, you've been very organised and professional about how you've gone about, you know, all your practices so far, yeah, and how has that impacted you, and what is, you know, how does that help you shift your plan or help with a PhD?
That's a very, very good question, Dan, because I think obviously we're all hugely impacted in some way or another. And I think in terms of my research, there was a few, you know, hectic days in March when I realized that, you know, the Euros are probably not going to go on here. You know, I think in first, you know, you think, you know, how can I kind of overcome this? You see it as a bit of a challenge, and I realized quite quickly, to be honest, that there's no chance the Euros will go on here. So I sat down with my supervisors, and we tried to kind of come up with a plan how we could kind of, because it's not just the fact that you know, the Euros were postponed. I guess that's one thing, but even if the Euros were to go on, would it have been kind of you know, right for me to go down there and start to collect data and all that sort of stuff as well? Would I only be, you know, it really raised some kind of new practical and ethical questions for me as a PhD researcher that I've never really encountered. That, you know, gives me some kind of possibility to reflect on, I guess. And it's really one of those where, you know, in the sociology of sport and in, you know, in just general studies that relies on ethnographies and stuff, which I was planning to do, you often read these great ethnographic reflections, which I really enjoy reading. But in my case, it was slightly different because the field itself kind of became unavailable for me. So, you know, I never actually reached that point where I could start reflecting on the field work, because it was kind of taken away from me before it even began. So it was you know.
Have you maintained your reflections though as a researcher during this period?
Definitely. I think it's, you know, it's the kind of paradox of doing social research in a time of social distancing. And really, you know, those days from, I think that was from around 10th of March to the 17th of March, which was actually the day this talk was meant to be on. Yeah. That week, there was so much uncertainty around the Euros. That was probably that week where I was trying to find out what was happening. I was trying to be, you know, try to come up with plans, try to be flexible in regards to, because I know, you know, I'm not the only person. I'm not the only PhD researcher whose research would have been impacted by COVID-19, but obviously it kind of happened to my plan in a quite unique way, and also quite late in my PhD journey as well, as I was kind of just entered my last 12 months of funding as well. And also I think this is, what I've learned from it as well is that it's obviously a risk that's always there in mega event research. There's always this risk that what you are researching might become postponed or cancelled. But at the same time, I would argue that postponements and cancellations are quite important as well to analyze. It can actually say quite a bit about different questions, whether that's who has the power to postpone these events in health and safety, on health and safety grounds. And it raises some questions on how to work from that postponement till the event actually takes place. So I think that if anything, the kind of pandemic crisis has showed that every PhD or every research plan will have some obstacles, but at the same time there is possibilities to kind of navigate around them, and sometimes it actually opens a few new avenues as well to explore.
Yeah, completely. And I think the nature of being a social scientist is that you are immersed in reality. So you've got to deal with crisis, whatever that may be. And it won't be the first researchers to deal with, whether it's individual or organizational or national, international crisis. Obviously, this will affect everyone, not just the social scientists at the minute, but it's a fascinating period. If we look at it through the lens of security. How do you think COVID is going to impact security and policing of events and matches in the future? And maybe start with mega events and work your way down.
Yeah, so just as a kind of backdrop here, that we know that the Euros have been postponed, the Olympics have been postponed as well for 12 months. So how will the kind of post-pandemic mega event security look like, I guess is the question. And I have to kind of outline first this limitation that there's still so many things we don't know, so it's very difficult to say for sure. But I think what I think is that it will kind of reconfigure what security means at sports events. As I said before, sport mega event security is impacted by kind of events that happen externally and also internally to sports, and thereby the meanings kind of change as new threats emerge. The current threat, of course, is COVID-19, which means, well, the nature of the threat essentially means that people can't go to events, people can't go to the stadiums. So all of a sudden you have kind of new meaning of what event security means. So for instance, to use an example, very often before these mega events, they will desire something that's called clean spaces or clean sites that are kind of free from rival products and from dangerous objects or whatever. I guess in terms of the kind of post-COVID-19 sport mega events, clean sites refer to mega events without people, at least for some time. So you already see how these meanings change, and also in terms of the kind of measures. I mean, in terms of the measures, security measures, policing measures. We've seen some debate in England in recent weeks with the Project Restarts and the concerns that some have had concerns that fans might gather outside stadiums. These kind of concerns. So the kind of spatial implications as well. I'm not sure if there is a need for concern, but there have been some debates in the media. So the kind of spatial implications change. Sorry?
About that, Jan, because one of the things that we observed is that the Premier League, because of its, and you wrote about the Premier League's globalised nature. The Premier League, we wrote about it being obviously really networked, and it actually created a situation where it responded early before government. So we were quite pleased to see the Premier League working before government to take action. Can you offer a few comments around the idea that fans are going to show up? Is that a security risk at stadium? And then what is the risk for the Premier League moving forward?
So that comment, well, there's been a few comments in the media where there have been fears, and I assume it's the same in Germany today, where where games start up. There have been some kind of concerns that fans will gather outside the stadium, and I think that concern is largely based on, I think it was one game in France in the Champions League, but I think the situation now is much more different. And people have been in isolation now for months, weeks.
And in France at the time, they weren't in lockdown, were they? So
no, I think the rules in France, I'm not completely sure, but I'm pretty sure the rules in France were not as strict at the time. And also, I think people just had, at the time, that was March, so people had probably a bit less knowledge about what COVID and how serious it actually was. Of course, we knew it was serious, but
I think they announced behind closed doors for the game, but then the government hadn't announced lockdown, so it just created that lack of clarity and coherency in message from the people, leading society and government. So there's a bit of a tension between sport and government policy there.
Yeah, definitely. So I think in regards to coming back to the Project Restart and the risk of fans gathering outside stadiums, I don't think there's any evidence, and I think in terms of what we've seen from fans so far in kind of broad sense of the term, is that they've actually contributed to local communities, food banks, etc. And I would say it's difficult to say if they would gather outside stadiums. I think there's limited evidence to suggest so. But in terms of how it will impact security, of course, it will change the parameters of security. It will probably be more focused, as we just mentioned, on the outside of the grounds and the areas around where people might gather. Testing measures. It can kind of change the way we go to an event. And normally it's about just showing your ticket, going inside the stadium. Are they now going to check your temperature before you go in the stadium? How's it going to change? Some very big questions, really, some very interesting questions that emerge. And as I just come back to your question in regards to what changes it will mean for security. I think fans, of course, will be, after having experienced, or fans or event visitors after having experienced lockdown, they will make up new reflections before they go back to attending events again. They might think that it's probably not the best idea to go into these mass gatherings, even when it's of course allowed again. Whenever that happens, might be some people that are a bit more skeptical towards going to events. I'm not saying everyone will be, but there certainly will be some.
No, brilliant, Jan. I mean, my next question relates more. We've got a lot of people within the football collective, and a lot of people that I come across within the football industry's MBA and my master's students that are looking at doing a PhD. I guess this has put a massive shock into everyone, including everyone that is doing a PhD. What would be, what have been the reflection that you've had as a PhD researcher during the crisis in terms of how to shift and almost either get through this or keep moving forward? And then what type of thoughts would you have for people considering doing a research project or PhD in this area moving forward?
So I think the first lesson I would suggest is that you when you engage in a research project on mega events, is to probably consider that it might happen. Something might happen, so there might be good to have a few alternative plans. But second to that, I would also say that, as I said before, that it's important to, even if a postponement was to occur, even if there was a crisis that did happen, there are ways you can kind of look at this from different angles. In terms of research projects, I know that quite a few universities have kind of put a bit of a hold on empirical projects. How can you then collect data with no access to any participants, etc.? But there are other ways to kind of navigate this, maybe by looking at media discourses, by looking at the media portrayal of COVID in sport, look at the discourses around health, safety, security. And that's just speaking to my kind of narrow field as well, but I'm sure there are some kind of transferability in those in those ways of getting around it. And I think in terms of reflecting on my PhD, I think it's just important to take it a bit, it's a bit of a cliche, but take it a bit day by day, see what happens, try to give yourself time to think, try to give yourself time to, when something like this happens, things aren't going to get, you can't just change your project in one day. You need time to have a think about what is next, how can I get to the next step. And I can just talk from my own experience, of course, but of course there was a few weeks there where I had to significantly reshape research objectives, research aims, and stuff like this. And it can be a bit hard because you've been so invested into previous research question for 2 years, and all of a sudden you have to rejig it a bit. But I think the key is just to kind of try to be flexible, try to be as flexible as possible, try to see it as a bit of an opportunity, although it's not ideal, of course. It's not ideal being a researcher or it's not ideal being in the kind of current crisis at all. But in terms of working as a researcher or being a researcher, I think it's important to be flexible, try to overcome these things. And as you said before as well, it's a part of being a researcher, these things, and it's the kind of messy nature of research sometimes.
No, I totally agree. It's really interesting because I know some of the conversations that we've had over certainly the past few months, before the virus. I remember having conversations with Joel. I know Joel Rookwood, one of our colleagues at the University of Central Lancashire, had wrote about the potential impact of the coronavirus in one of his papers or chapters. And in a conversation that we had, we also said, we weren't predicting anything about the virus or nothing like that, but we said things were going to change for mega events, and that change was coming. And whether it was, the economic rationale, the sustainability issues, but that was, some of those discussions that we had knew it was coming. It kind of stemmed our conversations around the special issue. And one thing we've tried to do is create new networks between the people that we work with, and new ideas, and work on projects together that we think have got some relevance. So maybe if you just want to give a bit of information around the rationale for the special issue we've got, and
definitely
plug a little bit of details for people.
Definitely. I mean, the special issue will look at, well, the theme of the special issue will be the sport mega events in the 2020, so the next 10 years. And what we're looking to explore in this, especially I'm saying we because of course Dan and Joel are the guest editors with me as well. And what we're looking to do is to look at some of the outlooks on sport mega events in the next 10 years. Of course, we encourage, because the events are yet to be played, we encourage theoretical, conceptual papers as well. And what we really want to do here is to provide different outlooks on the upcoming events. So in the next 10 years, we have a range of different and very, very interesting mega events. Of course, some of them have been postponed, but some of them haven't, because they're still so many years away. And we're looking at, for instance, the upcoming Euro 2020. We're looking at the Tokyo Olympics, looking at the Qatar World Cup. We're looking at the World Cup which is shared by Canada, Mexico, and the US. And all these events raise questions around, the change, not just in terms of COVID-19, but just in general around hosting a mega event. There are a range of questions. Why, for instance, for instance, in the case of the United 2026, how can you read into the politics of Mexico, United States, and Canada hosting such a big event together? I think the Qatar World Cup has been heavily discussed, and certainly will be some interesting papers as this event approaches in time as well. But I think that special issue, really, what we seek to do is to offer some new ideas through a network of scholars who work in the field, who are based. We have already had some fantastic abstracts in from scholars all around the world, to be honest, and I think this special issue really will provide a glimpse into the world of sport mega events the next 10 years. And I really think that it will offer some great ideas. It will offer some great thoughts and really encourage debate in the field of sport mega event and a range of topics. We're talking from a range of different academic disciplines, not confined to just one or two. We highly encourage contributions from different academic fields, and I really think that, you know, by opening these debates, it can really serve as a kind of foundation for future work as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I think I mean, I totally agree. I think when we first put the idea, it was because we thought mega events needed a rethink, and things couldn't necessarily carry on the way it was, because, you know, there was issues with sustainability right the way through. So I think, if anything, the things that have happened in society over the past couple of months have really pressed that issue and idea. So the critical papers around rethinking what mega events might look like are going to be really important for that special issue. So we'd welcome contributions. I mean, the final thing I'll ask you, you know, and feel free to add anything else at this point, but obviously, when we set up the PhD, it was the support people. I remember when you first got in touch, I said, and I say this to everyone, but hardly anyone ever does it, say, just write a blog post and put it on the website so people know who you are and what you're about, to put your contact details on so they can get in touch with you. Then you kind of just went, yeah, okay, sent it to me the next day, and put it online. Just maybe just talk through like a bit of your experience with the Football Collective, and, you know, what it's been like, pros and cons maybe, and, you know, as a PhD researcher, is it something you'd recommend? And you can be honest, Jan, because I know you didn't expect this question.
No, as you said, I think I joined just before I started my PhD, so around like January 2018 or something. And I'd already heard about it at this stage, because obviously I knew about it through yourself and Pete and John Hayton and a few others who had kind of founded it, if you'd like. And for me, at the time, you know, I contributed with a few blog posts and introduction, and I quickly realized it's a great platform to not just showcase some of my own interests and research, but also to really get to know new people. And I think that's really what it's all about as well, meeting new people virtually like now, or in real life like we've done at past conferences and socials. And also, speaking as a young researcher, I think it's very, very nice to have these kind of conversations like we have now. And I think it's really, really helpful to have that support when you are a young researcher, to have the support from more established scholars who take time to even if it's such a thing as a retweet of an idea or a research paper or whatever, or when you speak to others at conferences, it gives you, I guess, some kind of reassurance, and it gives you, and I think reassurance in terms of being a PhD researcher is always something you look after, and something you really want to get, because, you know, being a PhD researcher can be, you know, quite uncertain, and can be quite stressful time, I'm sure, as well. And then having something like the Football Collective, where you can share thoughts, get supportive ideas, create networks of you know, colleagues from different academic disciplines, is really invaluable. And talking from my own experience, I've been to Glasgow in 2018. It's horrible weather. That's all I remember. And also been to Sheffield last November as well. And both these conferences have been really great, because I think as soon as you get to these conferences and you get the program, you just see how many different disciplines that are represented in the Football Collective. You know, you have something from most academic disciplines, and you can it's really a place where you can share ideas, get new ideas, and also for collaboration as well, which I think is just fantastic as a young academic or as a young researcher to have. And you know, I think also just in the last few weeks, I think it's been really great to see these kind of events, you know, just these talks that are quite informal via Zoom, Of course, there was the conference on, well, it was this week. I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday.
It just feels like a month ago, the conference.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It goes so quick. But obviously, there was a conference a few days ago that I looked on. I was watching on YouTube, which was very well organized, fantastic papers. And it's just good to have something. I've enjoyed the podcasts with Josh and Paddy and Danny as well. And yeah, it's just a lot of stuff happening, and it really is good to keep an eye out and to engage in these events and kind of gain new networks and new collaboration opportunities and new friendships, most importantly.
Yeah, and that's brilliant, mate, and it's great to hear. I think that when we set it up, and I know Paul Kitchen's on here, because Paul and I have been friends and collaborators in different respects for years, but we informally wanted to create these networks. Paul's also set up the mentor program, the collective, to formalise this and drive it on to make sure there's not just evidence, but people were getting genuine support as well, and not just look of socially connecting with someone through the collective. But personally, it's been great to have you involved, Jan. I know.
Thank you.
I think my last meeting in person was with you, and Betty on the beach in New
Brighton. Yeah, that was when it all kind of. I think when after I went on a train back home to Liverpool that day, that's when all the emails came in and like shutdown really started to happen. I think that was our last meeting, and hopefully hopefully we can meet up for a coffee soon as well.
Yeah, I think and the other side of it, and it's worth mentioning, like the Political Studies Association subgroup for sport, and Peter Millward is really fundamental in creating some like networks and social groups that's spared on a lot of this early work and what we've got now with the collective. So I think from my perspective, if any senior colleagues hear this, it's something to there's still a big gap there, and still, even though we do stuff individually, there's things that we can do together that could be quite powerful. In fact, it's worth mentioning Sartak, Sartak Mondal, who led the conference on Tuesday.
Yeah, massive well done to him.
Yeah, key on the podcast, and also just got himself a PhD scholarship at Sheffield.
That's amazing news. It's
he's done incredible.
It's very, very good to see as well, and I think that conference that I mentioned earlier on, last week this week actually, it was so well, it was just great to follow online. The way it was organized was so professional and at the same time so informal, and it was very, very good to see.
It's ridiculous because he's an undergraduate. It's just absolutely awesome. He's just
amazing.
So, Jan, I'm gonna at this point formally thank you for just sharing some insights on your research.
Yeah, thanks for having me as well, Dan.
I know it's a bit different to the talk that we had planned and a little bit later, but really appreciate your insights. And when we are sorted out, we'll 100% welcome you with open arms. With a bit
sounds very good.
And we'll get out for a curry again soon, I'm sure.
That sounds even better.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you. Have a good day.